Okay, well, it's been a while, and so got a few things to report. Short story about Opentoonz is it crashes too much, crashes way too much, and sometimes with fairly trivial operations. So there's a lot of areas where it's useful, and it sure looked like that was the direction I was heading. But what I've found in practice is it really interrupts the workflow a lot. So anyway, it sort of made me rethink what I was doing, and sort of came back to and landed on Blender MyPaint Krita, mostly Krita, as being the best place for me to be. So first thing I want to talk about is making a real clear distinction between your pencil test stage, where you plan everything out, and you should have everything planned out at that stage, versus the final art, ink and paint. If you're at the point of doing ink and paint and detailing, the actual animation plan should have been completely all figured out. So now if you commit the same sin that I often do, where you're sort of testing an idea, so then you want to sort of finish it out before you've really done your planning, then you're gonna do like me and wind up with a lot of sort of half-finished ideas. However, you do learn a lot of things along the way, and it's cool. So anyway, what I found interesting here, let me see if this seems to be puking on the RAM disk, but yeah, let me go to my image reference folder here. It's just a bunch of screenshots from different animes. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about penciling. All right, I happen to be finding that I really like using MyPaint, because if I hit F11 and put it in full screen mode, this is essentially the actual non-scaled size of the final frame that would be rendered. So therefore, if I want to say I want to map out a close-up, okay, I can block this in, and I love the real estate. There's lots of room to work. And you say, well, yeah, but MyPaint doesn't really have animation. And that is true. However, at any point in time, you can just hit Control C, and it completely seamlessly exchanges, the clipboard exchanges perfectly with Krita. Haven't really tested a lot going back into MyPaint, but so if you're kind of just wanting to plan things out, you could maybe grab a blue or a red pencil kind of thing. Let's just make this, you can make this more transparent. And by the way, this is kind of interesting too. If you have multiple layers of stuff going on here, okay, in MyPaint, and I find this quite useful. First of all, if you cut it to the clipboard, you only get that layer. Whatever's the active layer is the only thing that comes over on the clipboard. So that's actually really useful, because you could, for example, maybe in multiple layers, just sort of plan out a movement, and then you could cut these over into Krita, one at a time. And there's a little bit of housekeeping involved, because you've got to set up where your keyframes are and then flatten your image so that stuff that you drew here over top of each other actually becomes separated in time. But doesn't really take that long. There's another significant thing about this particular workflow, which is that compared to Krita, compared to Opentoonz, what I find is the MyPaint brushes, and obviously Opentoonz has MyPaint brushes, they're pretty good, but the most responsive experience I've had is in MyPaint. So if I'm actually just sketching things out, planning, designing, I just like working in MyPaint better. It's fast, it's intuitive, and it just works. Hardly ever blows up. I don't even remember the last time MyPaint blew up on me. So I can map this out, and then say, another thing that's interesting is that if I take Let's go ahead and kill a couple of these layers. What I have found is if I take a, I'm just randomly grabbing a frame here. Insert that as a new layer. Okay, so you got this guy. What I've found is that the basic MyPaint pencil, this one right here, it's in set 2, I believe by default. And I am using like MyPaint version 1. I'm not using the latest version. I actually, there are things I don't really like about the later versions, so it is what it is, but most of the brush sets are the same. The basic pencil, if you grab that pencil and then shrink it twice, hit the little bracket key to make it 2 steps smaller, like that, that will come into Krita almost exactly like the lines you see in anime where it's scanned pencil work. Okay, now that's hard to see obviously because it's got a lot of garbage on it. So let's just do this. Let's kill that layer and just draw a line. Okay, go over here and we'll go ahead and kill that one. Okay, so then if you zoom in, you can see the quality of the line it's real similar. The line in the anime is actually a little softer, but it's really close. And it looks good once you do your ink and paint. Okay, so in my case, I also have a brush preset in Krita. I don't have icons for them here, but I basically have 2 brush presets that I seem to be coming back to a lot. One is like a pencil kind of brush, and the other one is more of an ink kind of brush. So I just said those in reverse. This is the pencil one. Let's make that black, and you'll see. You can see that the quality of the line is very similar to what you're seeing in the frame that was grabbed from the anime. If you take this up to 4 pixels, it's almost perfectly. What I find is if you're doing a close-up, you want it about 4 pixels. If it's a wider shot, shrink it down to 3 pixels. Pretty much looks right. So this is useful because if you're working in full screen mode here in MyPaint, you can, let's say I'm going to map this out like this. I'm going to map a character here in kind of a wide shot. Okay, so we'll go ahead and take this down in opacity and add a layer above it because let's say ostensibly I'm going to do my ink here. Okay, so the good thing is I know that this brush shrunk twice is going to look pretty much exactly right at its actual rendered size in an anime. So now I can zoom in on this guy, and the size of this brush really dictates what I'm going to do. You know, it's tempting to put a lot more detail here, okay, because obviously when it's zoomed in like this, the brush looks really big. But the thing is, here's your actual size. So you gain nothing by adding detail. In fact, it'll actually make it look much worse. So kind of knowing how your brushes fit into your workflow helps you to create assets at the correct scale that's going to look good when it's finally all put together. All right, so obviously if we have this big bold brush, then we're going to want to keep the art simpler, right? And don't waste time with detail where it's actually going to be a complete waste of resources. Now I can hit Control-C, go back over to here. Let's go ahead and kill these layers. I don't really need that guy in there. Okay, and so that's the actual size it's going to be. If I hit Control-0, so it's, again, actual size, you can see that, again, you're not gaining anything by adding a bunch of detail. So I can go ahead and fill this sort of the usual way. I like to do it on a different layer and flatten it later. But okay, so now here's one thing you might complain about. In Opentoonz, you could go in. Well, first of all, let's put this one to bed real quick. You might make the argument, well, Opentoonz lets you do filling over a range. That is true. But number one, it is sort of error prone, and you're always going to have to go back and fix things. And number two, since we're putting the paint in a different layer, we only have to do keyframes where something's changed. So you really get the same benefit in Krita. So setting that aside, the other thing you're going to complain about probably is this right here. Okay, so my fill settings, I've got a threshold of 1, grow the selection 2 pixels, and a feathering radius of 1. Basically, that works really well. Let's go ahead and take the feathering radius off. Let's just see what happens if we remove the feathering radius. I'm kind of curious. And it's really no better. So basically, these settings are good. So now what you're going to complain about is that you're missing this thing right here. What the thing is, in Opentoonz or any other animation software you're going to use, you're going to have to go in and do fix-ups anyway. And what I'm finding is you can do the free in Opentoonz you can do a freehand fill. So what you'd be able to do in Opentoonz is draw a lasso around this area, and it's going to find the enclosed areas and it's going to fill it properly. Okay. Well, going through and doing those fix-ups is not appreciably faster than going in with a brush and going like that. You know, I'm just not seeing the benefit. So for me, this workflow seems to be working pretty well. And it's very fast to go in and actually do aesthetic fix-ups, right? Clean this up right here. Take those lines out, et cetera, et cetera. And so, anyway, having said that, I'm going to see what I've got here that might be useful to look at. I think this one might be good. Let's just give it a second to load and see. Yeah, okay, so it looks like there's some, yeah, okay. So this is, my son and I have both been watching Psyche on Netflix, which is a pretty good anime. And so I drew this character kind of with Psyche in mind, you know. But, you know, I'm pretty happy with it. It's only 3 keyframes, just like an anime. It only moves when it has to. The background was done by simply literally bringing in a photograph of a tennis court and then applying the artistic oil paint filter. And you know, I won't go into what the settings were, but so you know, we're getting pretty good results, and you know, this maybe took a half hour, 45 minutes to do. I mean, it really didn't take very long. So for me, I seem to be finding a workflow that I like. Now, another thing, this is going to be the last thing I'm going to add today, but which I think is really thinking outside of the box, and I think it's something you want to consider. I'm going to go ahead and kill these guys. Okay, Krita does not have keyframing. Okay, so you could argue that if you've got a camera move or something like that, you might want to go ahead and bring the art either into Opentoonz or even Blender, map your animated or still imagery to a plane, and so that you can do a camera move, so you can scale things in real time and animate them. You can't really do that in Krita. I admit it is a weakness, but I'm sure it's one they're going to address before too long. So what do you do in the meantime? Well, my thinking is this. First of all, with the Blender grease pencil, for example, you still have to do, you know, you have to go through and do interpolation kind of manually. I mean, there are hotkeys you can use to automatically interpolate, but it almost never does a perfect job. You almost always have to tweak it anyway. So the question is, you know, how do you get that effect you're looking for in an efficient way when you don't have, you know, keyframe interpolation? And my answer is, don't be stupid. Let's just think outside of the box. First of all, any animation that you're going to have needs to be mapped out at the pencil test stage. Okay? You may finesse it later and add some detail, whatever, but basically, if you haven't mapped out the movement early, you're pissing in the wind, as I like to say. So let's go ahead and hit discard here. So what if we had a character? There's actually 2 things I want to say. Let's say we have a character that's going to go from a wide shot back here to the camera's going to move, let's say, and we wind up with this close-up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close these windows so I'm not getting that stupid thing going on. Okay, so this is what's going to happen, is this move right here. Okay? First of all, you want to always go from larger to smaller, okay? That may sound obvious, but if you take, so I'm going to go ahead and start this over again. So if you take this guy here, All right, and then that's just a guide, and I'm going to draw a really quick ink over top of it. Okay, so I'm just going to say, okay, here's my character really fast. We'll give him eyes like One Punch Man. Okay. Okay, so there's my character. Well, again, this probably goes without saying, but if I go ahead and copy this into Krita and say, let's go ahead and move it over here. Let's copy the frame. All right, so that at frame 24, let's say, we want to have it blown up. Well, obviously, the problem doing it that way is that your lines get blurred because you expand them. So the simple solution is you just always work in reverse. Okay? So let's take this and just start all over again. Okay? Get rid of those. Okay, so if we're going to have the move from far away to close, then draw the close one first. Right? Let's do this. And then we'll even give this guy a bald head like One Punch Man. I can't remember what the guy's actual name is in the show. Okay. So this is cool because in full screen mode, you just go like this. And let's say we put this over here. Copy that frame so we've actually got a key on it. And then at 24, just go like this. Shrink it down, and like I said, always work in reverse from larger to smaller. All right, and then if you want to, you can go in and manually, turn on the onion skin so you can see where you're going to want to be. Obviously, this doesn't take into account easing, but again, if the computer could calculate the easing for you, it's going to get it wrong more than half the time, where you have to go in and tweak it anyway. So my thinking is you're always going to be doing some manual tweaking. So just get over it, right? Okay, so shift. So I'll even go ahead and do my easing like that. So now my character is going. Okay, and I actually could put in a keyframe here, believe it or not. This is the dumbest thing in the world, but it actually looks pretty good. Is go ahead and insert a keyframe. Turn on my brush. Uh-oh, I better go to my correct brush preset. And just go like this. Okay, let's turn off our onion skins and play it back. Whoops. Okay, we need to go turn our end frame way up so we can actually see that take place. Boom. Okay. So anyway, that's that. So is there another way? Well, what about this way? What if we do it like this? Come over here. Let's go ahead and kill these guys. All right, let's Control C. Control V. Copy this in. Hey, where'd it go? Did I hit the wrong hotkeys? Okay. All right. So now one problem we have is this is actually positioned wrong, but we'll put this guy where he's supposed to be so they match. Okay. So now this is kind of interesting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this frame. Okay. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control. I'm just going to drag this around and just do a screenshot. Control print. I think it's Alt print screen actually. Okay, Control V. Now, obviously a layer, if you're going to do it this way, you probably want to have this in multiply mode. Okay, so you can see the two together, but why not save yourself some time by just create the keyframes this way. Just zoom in on your page, kind of sort of put things where you want them to be. Paste them in. Okay, that's interesting. How did I get that back to? Oh, if you're doing this, you want to hit print screen. You're not you're not cutting to the clipboard, the usual way. You're actually hitting print screen. So we can go ahead and get rid of that. Paste this guy in multiply mode. Okay, so now you have all these keyframes in there. And so, this isn't the way you want to work all the time. But it's not too bad if you're wanting to figure out what a camera move is going to look like. The detail doesn't matter. I mean, even if it gets scaled and blurred out or whatever, it doesn't matter because you're going to be inking over it anyway, right? So the idea is to know what you're going to do so that later you can go in and fix things. So now I'm going to go ahead and kill these two guys just so I can sort of demonstrate what the whole ink and paint process might look like. Okay, so I'm going to take this down to a low opacity, add a layer. Now I'm going to grab my, I believe this is my brush. I don't have icons for them. I need to figure out how to assign icons. Yeah, so there's my brush. Okay, then I'm going to put the stabilizer on. I like the stabilizer better than weighted smoothing because the smoothing effects are about the same, but the stabilizer will finish your stroke. So wherever you stop, it will go ahead and keep going until the stroke is done, which is kind of important. So I'm just going to go ahead and 1, 2, and right now my stabilizing length is probably, my distance is probably longer than it really needs to be, but yeah, that's better. So again, you know, it's quite quick, and because I have this brush preset both in MyPaint and in Krita, I know that these lines are going to look pretty much like any anime you would watch on TV. This is going to look correct at, you know, its native resolution. Which sometimes I work in full HD, sometimes I work in broadcast HD, which would be 1280 by 720. What I found with both anime and with feature films, frankly, is if you work at broadcast HD, performance is a little better, and the client and the audience don't care. If it gets scaled up to 1920 by 12 or by 1080, yeah, it's softened a little bit. It looks a little softer, but it looks fine. It's not a problem. So why not get the performance advantage, right? Okay, so now apparently this is One Punch Man. Boom, boom. I don't even know what his eyebrows look like, but there you go. And now we're working fast, so we want to add a shadow layer. So let's inherit the alpha, turn the opacity of it down, zoom out, go back to our brush, make it big, and just kind of add the shadows where we want them. All right, and then turn that layer back down. And in practice, what you would do is you would really want to get the whole thing inked in before you do any flattening. But once you're good to go, I believe it's Control-Shift-E, flattens it all out, and it looks pretty good. So anyway, that's it for today. This is kind of where I've been landing, is roughing things in MyPaint. I love the tactile, the feel of the brushes, man. It's just nicer than in any other app I've used. Blender Grease Pencil, frankly, comes close. But the only advantage I'm seeing, you know, Blender Grease Pencil gives you an infinite canvas, which MyPaint has too. And you can animate on that infinite canvas. So if I was going to take this workflow and amend it in any way, this is what I would do, is I would do the pencil test in the Blender Grease Pencil. But I'd still do the final inking and all that in Krita at this point. So maybe before I go, I'll show you one other thing. I was just actually taking a couple frames that I put together, and then I just grabbed a still frame that I think I got from Food Wars, just to look at, well, what happens if I just quickly lay in maybe some particle effects or some glows or whatever, and you know, okay, so yeah, I mean, how useful is this? I don't know, but the glow is actually on a separate layer. That took like 30 seconds to animate, right? This part is actually my characters, you know, that I animated. Just a real quick test, and this was all drawn on MyPaint and literally just copied over. I think I even did the ink in MyPaint, so it actually was just painted in Krita. So anyway, I think that obviously we're still dealing with half-finished tests, but I think we're getting to the point where we're ready to actually do some real production and have it, you know, credibly emulate the aesthetic and the quality we're looking for in a professional anime, which for me is non-negotiable. That's what we've got to. That's what we have to match. So, anyway, that's it for today. Post questions if you want, whatever, and see you next time.